but I'm going to get my PowerPoint pulled up here. Where did we go? Here we go.
And I will be monitoring your questions.
Okay.
So if you want, I can ask you, wait until then, or if I feel that it's important, I will ask you. Okay.
That sounds good. I'm open for flexibility, whatever makes sense.
Okay.
So thank you. And thank you for reminding me to announce our plant sale. We just scheduled our plant sale for, it's a Friday, Saturday, April 8th and 9th. So if you're in St. Johns County, or if you are close to St. Johns County, our Master Gardener plant sale will be April 8th and 9th. I'll be honest, we don't have all the other details yet, but we have the dates. So if you want more information, just send me an email or reach out, and we will be sure to get that to you.
Can I just announce something real quick? We are going to be recording this, or is being recorded right now, and you will be receiving the link with the recording, and if it's okay with Tara, the PDF of the PowerPoint. Okay. Absolutely. It will take me a week because I have to edit all the videos, and it's 10, but you will get that. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. So good morning, almost afternoon. We are going to talk about stormwater pond plantings. So in case you haven't noticed, Florida has an abundance of stormwater ponds. Most of us just have to go for a short walk around our neighborhood to find one, if not several. So we will start off by learning, what these ponds are, why they are important, how they work, and then we will spend the majority of the time discussing plantings. So I'd also like to point out that the same plants we are going to discuss for stormwater ponds can also be used in smaller backyard ponds, or even just in wet or moist areas in your landscape. So keep in mind as we're going through that this can still be relevant even if you don't have a stormwater pond necessarily to plant. But also, if you live in a neighborhood with an HOA, the information you learn today, you may be able to have some influence discussing with the HOA board on improving the current retention or detention pond situation with some of this information. Okay, so let me get my thing is paused here. There we go. Okay, so Florida has over 95,000 stormwater ponds. That is a lot of ponds. And this is because in the early 1980s, Florida legislature passed laws requiring treatment of stormwater. So stormwater systems were established to mimic the role of natural wetlands. So what do wetlands do? What do stormwater ponds do? Well, they control flooding in two ways. So they slow down the storm surges and absorb the rainwater before it reaches the water bodies. They also filter nutrients and sediments from the runoff. So stormwater ponds are really good at capturing the stormwater, but not necessarily as good as they could be in actually improving the water quality and actually filtering a lot of the non-point source pollution. But plants are the missing link that can really help improve the systems. So that's why it's important to plant around your stormwater ponds, and we're going to go into all that today. So just a quick explanation of the different types of ponds. So we have retention pond and detention pond. And basically the difference, retention ponds, they hold the water and then it slowly seeps into the ground, into the aquifer. So at points in time, they can not have water in them. So they tend to have like plants, but they can be dry at times. Whereas the detention ponds are the most recognizable because they have a permanent pool of water with an outflow to a waterway. So here we see an example of a standard design for a wet detention pond. So basically, the stormwater is going to flow in through a pipe or channel where it says inflow on this picture, and the water level is going to rise. Now, as it rises, the sediment and the pollutants sink to the bottom. When the water rises to the outflow, the pipe or the opening, it will flow out of the pipe and into the waterway. So I have the map of where St. John's drains. This came from the St. John's River Water Management District, but basically, you know, the green lines drain to the St. John's River, and the white drains to the Guana, Matanzas, or Pellicer Creek. But basically, they ultimately all end up in the St. John's River and then the Atlantic Ocean. So wherever you live, it's ultimately, you know, going to end up in your local river and then the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so why are we concerned about the water once it's in the pond? Well, untreated stormwater runoff is considered our state's leading source of water pollution. Stormwater contributes approximately 80 to 95% of heavy metals, such as lead, copper, cadmium, that enter Florida waterways. Stormwater ponds, the way they currently are, only remove between 30 and 40% of the nitrogen that comes in from various sources, fertilizers. We see our friendly little pooch here contributing his own source of non-point source pollution, as well as other pollutants that enter ponds. You know, we have pesticides. As the grass clippings break down, they release nitrogen, you know, gas and oil from the roads, trash, etc. So all of these are just non-point source pollution that end up in these ponds, which ultimately end up in our aquifer or the waterway. And if we had plants around the pond, they would significantly capture these pollutants. So they filter before they even get into the pond. When we have, you know, so all of these pollutants we were just discussing, these contribute to, you know, all these factors here. So sediment buildup, elevated nutrients, that's one we're very familiar with, because you can see the algal blooms that result. Invasive weeds and depleted oxygen, which leads to fish kills, can result shoreline erosion. There are just all sorts of you know, harmful environmental factors when the ponds are unhealthy. But as you've been saying, the plants are an incredibly functional way to reduce these pollutants, to filter the runoff, the grass clippings, everything from entering the water, which in turn, there's going to reduce these pollutants and absorb the nutrients. So the plants can absorb and use that nitrogen from the runoff in a positive way, keeping it out of the water. And all this is going to just improve the water quality. And other bonuses, I would say, benefits are, when you have these plantings around your ponds, it's naturally going to create habitat for wildlife. And when done well, really improve the beauty and aesthetics of your community. This is one of several images we will see throughout the slideshow. And just to show you the difference, you know, this looks like a freshly planted one, and it's not grown in, and it's not even like the best I've seen, but you can see a before and after beginning of a planting, we'll say. Not that it's not the best, but it's the beginning. It's not fully grown and lush like some of the others that we'll see, but it can really add beauty to the neighborhood, which could be a selling point to people that may have more influence over this, that may not quite understand all the environmental benefits as well. So a little bit about the legalities. So, you know, we discussed how in the 80s, Florida passed laws requiring this treatment of our stormwater, and they're highly permitted. So the permitting is with the water management district. So in our area, it's St. Johns River Water Management District and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So go through them with questions and permitting. But if you are, and you need to get permission to do any work in a retention pond from whoever the authority in charge is. So just be sure to find out who that is. And also the HOA association is responsible for ongoing maintenance. So you all as master gardeners and community members can have influence and, you know, share your knowledge, share the information. I'm always happy to, you know, share this PowerPoint with anyone that if there's an HOA that is serious and wants to learn about how to do this, you know, I'm happy to virtually, you know, teach them the basics as well. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about plant selection. Pardon the wordiness of this slide. Some of those are just notes as reminders to myself, but the image you see here, you have the bank top, the bank slope, I can't see on the slides there, the shallow upper littoral zone, and then the middle lower littoral zone. We are going to see this image repeatedly throughout here, and I'm going to simplify it by just using the bank top, bank slope, etc. terminology, but I'm using this slide to explain in more detail what they are. So the bank top, you know, that's the drier area. It's not as sloped. You can put drier plants on it. And then you have the littoral zones, and this is where the land and the water meet. And, you know, sometimes parts of them are wetter than others. So you have the upper part, which is more shallow, and that gets divided into short-stemmed marginal plants that grow on the bank and do well with the fluctuating water levels. Then you have the middle zone where you have the floating wetland plants, and they have roots that dangle, but are also rooted in the pond bottom. And then the lowest zone, these are the fully submerged plants that grow entirely underwater and where it's deepest. To make this simpler, so you don't have to remember this terminology, and it's also the way I think about it in my brain, we are going to use the terminology here: bank top, bank slope, etc. And the reason is there is a wonderful database. That's what the link is here. It's a new database on trait-based selection of stormwater pond plants. So the plant information that I'm going to share from here forward comes from this publication. So it makes it easy to look up this information later on. And I just selected like my favorite choices from each of the categories, but there are 82 plant species on this list that you can refer to. The ones in here are just the ones that I found the most appealing for various reasons. So just keep in mind, there is this EDIS publication that has a database that's going to in detail explain all the characteristics of these plants we're going into. But I'm also happy to share the PowerPoint later on as well. So it ranks the plants on aesthetics, so their appearance, you know, if they're going to be an attractive plant, their color, shape, texture, size, all the elements that we look at when designing a garden. It also includes their function. So when you're designing for a pond planting or any sort of, you know, where it's going to filter pollution in wet areas, you really want to understand how the plants function. So ones that have a high nutrient removal capacity, you know, others have longer, stronger root systems to help with erosion control and shoreline buffering and, you know, wave attenuation. Food and habitat for wildlife. So, you know, looking at all levels of functionality of the plants, so you can pick ones that best meet the needs for the different zones, as well as, you know, if you were just using this to select plants for your own backyard, because let's say you have some wet areas, you can select based on the characteristics you need for that site. And then the list also talks about the habitats. So, drought tolerance versus, flooding, inundation tolerance, salt tolerance, has the hardiness zones, etc. So we are, let's see, plant selection tips. So when selecting plants for the ponds, I'm going to recommend using natives. Legally, it's only required to use natives in the actual water, submerged water areas, but it's still recommended for all the plantings. They are, selecting the right ones is going to help them be more hardy on the site, but also providing for habitat for wildlife, etc. So it's just some general tips. You would want to select plants based on their size, texture, and other characteristics that you would in any sort of planting. So it looks good and it has a balanced appeal to it. Also selecting for the mature size of the plant. A lot of times it's easy to accidentally plant something that's small and you don't realize it's going to get as big as it does, especially with trees. So we want to space them properly. Also, when planting around the pond, we don't want to block the view. So you want to plant the taller plants at the bottom of the slope and the shorter ones at the top. And then for larger shade trees, it makes sense if you plant them on the north side of the pond so that the shadow is primarily on the bank. So it's not actually shading the water or the water plants. And some design tips. So here's an example of how certain plants could be arranged around a pond. You see the larger trees are on the property lines, and then the other plants tend to be massed for a greater impact. So several of each plant, which will also help with the filtration and, erosion control. Have strong, big clumps of root systems. And once again, having, the taller shrubs at the bottom of the slope to help protect your view. Now, soil structure is as important here as anywhere else. So ideally, you would have, sandy soil with some organic matter. If it's too rocky, it might be harder for the roots to penetrate. And if it's too mucky, it might just be harder for the roots to anchor. But there are ways of working with this. So here we see just a few different examples of materials that can help prevent erosion and help the plants from washing away while they're in the establishment phase. So in this top picture, you see mini baffles. They're gonna hold the water and keep the soil from eroding. And then in this middle picture, you'll see, there are various types of landscape fabric like burlap or jute that you can plant through. And then on the bottom, you see riprap, which it may be, you may need to do that in certain parts of it, but then planting around it with plants. Okay, so here we see an example of a before and after. So where I live, we have a whole lot of these before pictures. So you can just imagine, when it gets mowed, the grass clippings will, if there's a heavy rain after, they'll end up in the pond. All of the, the fertilizer that runs off from the surrounding houses, it's going to end up in there. And then you look at the second picture and you could see, you can just visualize if it's planted like that, the filtration process that's going to happen. And also just from a community enhancement standpoint, I would prefer to have a planted area to walk around, and you can have pathways through it. You can have openings for benches So I know this one looks a little more natural and wild than some, but keep in mind you can make it, you can have openings here and there, be a nice place to walk your dog around, and it would give the houses more privacy. Okay, so as we move forward discussing the plants, in order to keep things simple, we're just going to refer to the bank top, the bank slope, the water's edge, and the offshore area. And keep in mind, this is also how that plant database I talked about organizes. So we're keeping the same terminology for consistency. And also, I just think these terms make more sense because they're descriptive of exactly what is going on each part of the slope. So we're going to start off by talking about plants that are good for all the zones. They're kind of universal, so they can handle the moist and dry fluctuations. Some trees would be red maple, loblolly bay, bald cypress. So we'll start off with some of the shrubs for this that would work in pretty much all the zones. So you have buttonbush. If you've ever seen this, it has really unique white puffball flowers. It's also a great host plant for butterflies. It does well in average to wet to flooded soils, and it's a nice medium size. Sometimes they can get a little taller than 8 feet, but in general, it's a nice medium-sized shrub, good for a wet area in your landscape as well. Clethra, I think, is actually even a bit more attractive than the buttonbush. It's called sweet pepper bush. It's similar size and it spreads by stolons, which makes it good for erosion control. And another thing is it's salt tolerant. Let's see here. I need to move there we go. Okay. Another plant you may be familiar with that is pretty easy to find and very hardy and does well in our area anyway is the firebush, the Hemilia patens. This one it doesn't normally get about 6 foot tall, but usually stays a little shorter than that. It has shallower roots, so maybe not best on a super sloped area, but at the top or where it's not as prone to erosion, but it can handle that occasional flooding. And then we have the Dahoon holly here, which is just a great stable native holly, great for the water's edge. The berries are going to provide for birds, an easy hardy plant to grow. Then we have the loblolly bay. We have lots of these in our area here in St. Johns County. And what's nice about them is whenever you get a rain, that's when they start to bloom. So if you have a big rainfall, suddenly you wake up the next morning and there are these little big white flowers everywhere. They look very similar to magnolia flowers, but smaller, but they're different plants altogether. And it's evergreen. Okay, so let's go to the bank top. So this is the drier area where the plants are not in regular contact with water. So we have the purple lovegrass. I mean, purple lovegrass, it's unique. It does get these purple plumes in the fall. It's not great for being flooded, so it's very drought tolerant, which is good for those drier bank tops. It's a nice, small, short grass, but it does spread through rhizomes, which is nice, so helps with stabilization. And it makes a nice border plant because it's shorter, but definitely plant en masse, plant several. Now, to many of our displeasure, we've recently learned that blanket flowers not as native here as we thought. It's still in all of my PowerPoints. I haven't gone through them yet, but it's not invasive. It's not bad. It's still it's good for butterflies, etc. So Gaillardia and the dune sunflower here, they are often found growing together on the beach. On the dunes. They make a really lovely combination, and they are both salt tolerant, incredibly drought tolerant, and very attractive. They just make a pretty combination. Also, the passion flower. So this one is the incarnata, which is one of the most attractive of the native passion flowers for Florida. It's deciduous, but it does spread through rhizomes and it's very drought tolerant. There's another passion flower called Passiflora suberosa that is more salt tolerant. So if you live in an area that gets salt spray, you would probably want to select that one. So that's the suberosa. And then the elderberry. So that's a very universally useful shrub or small tree. So these just naturally grow along wet areas. You'll see them along the roadside. They have berries that are great for birds. It's a nice medium-sized tree. And they have spread through rhizomes, so it's good they can fill in over time and really help with the shoreline stabilization. All right, so now we'll move on to the bank slope, the second stage here, where plants are temporarily inundated. So, and these buffer against, they are an extra good buffer against fertilizer runoff, grass clippings, etc. So we have the pink muley grass, which most of us are familiar with. It's highly planted. But I think, if you're going to have a plant that's kind of overused, it's might as well be pink muley grass because it's beautiful and functional and hardy. It does well. Butterflies overwinter in it. It's a nice 2 to 3 foot tall and wide. It's just kind of a great plant. It's drought tolerant, flood tolerant, salt tolerant. So it's kind of the plant for all areas for the most part, except for shade. It does not do well in shade. I was kind of exaggerating there, but for sun, pink muley grass, it's very hardy, native. And we also have Fakahatchee, which can actually, as far as hardiness and in certain problem areas, it's extra hardy. It does well. It's flood and drought tolerant. I've seen areas where even pink muley is not doing well, but the Fakahatchee is. That's what I was trying to get at. It grows through rhizomes, so it spreads, and it also comes in a dwarf form. So if you have an area where you don't want the full height of the 4 to 8 foot tall, you can get it in the dwarf form. And then we have the blue stem here. It's another one that's rhizomatous, so that helps with erosion control. Here we get into some ones that have more unique looks to them. The alligator flag. I see that growing on the roadsides everywhere in just like the ditches along the side of the road. And it's very attractive, very unique looking. And it's evergreen, spreads through rhizomes. Now, one that I haven't seen in person, but I would love to, is the sea purslane. So this one's just a short ground cover, but it is noted for having excellent nutrient uptake and filtering toxins. And by the way, because I don't think I have a slide for it, a lot of the plants we're mentioning, you may be wondering where you can actually find them to purchase, because sometimes these can be harder plants. They're not at a typical plant nursery. So I would like to just take a moment to point out there is a wonderful resource called Florida Association of Native Nurseries. It's FANN, F-A-N-N, and they have a website, very user-friendly. You can go to it and it will direct you to the native plant nurseries throughout the state. And you can even type in what particular plant you are looking for, and it will tell you the nurseries that have them. A lot of them are mail order, or if you're doing a large project, they can show you the difference between retail and wholesale. So just keep that in mind. FANN, Florida Association of Native Nurseries, so you can actually find these plants to purchase. And let's talk about the water's edge. These are plants that are constantly inundated. And there's a lot of really pretty ones in this section. So we have the golden canna. That's one of my favorites. And it's known for its excellent job of taking up nitrogen as well as phosphorus. And then my other favorite, these are the two prettiest in my opinion, the swamp lily, the Crinum americanum. and it's evergreen. Also, there are two native hibiscus, the coccineus and the grandiflorus. So the grandiflorus, the plant itself is larger. They are both deciduous, different flower color, and you can tell the flowers are a different shape. They're both quite beautiful, and I can't imagine a retention pond that would not be improved by the addition of these hibiscus. And we also have the Iris virginica. I've grown this a lot, and it's so easy. If you're going to grow an iris around a water area, choose the native ones. They're easy, they're beautiful. It's going to fill in and spread. The evergreen foliage is nice, and it sturdy for the water's edge, so helpful with that erosion control. And then a plant that's maybe it's not quite as, it's not as floriferously beautiful, but you have some rushes. So this soft rush, it has deep roots, which is great for shoreline stabilization. And it's really good at filtering solids, taking up nutrients. So it's important to select plants for their functionality as well. And I'm going to go back, and it adds texture. That fine texture can really set off the aesthetics and make other plants stand out as well. And then we have pickerel weed, which you probably also see a lot of along the roadside. So pretty. These huge purple spike of flowers, and how useful they are as well. Looks like I have a little spelling typo in there, but deciduous, not deciduous. And but a good replacement for sod in a wet area. With their nice root system, it's good for buffering waves, holding down sediment. It's good for taking up nutrients, reducing turbidity. So just an all-around excellent plant for a wet area. And then we have the arrowhead. Now I see these two growing together frequently along the roadside. They grow with no care. So you put them around your pond, and they're going to flourish once they're established. And they're both a nice kind of small, medium height. So the Sagittaria, the arrowhead, has a pretty, an attractive white flower, and it's good at taking up nutrients and reducing turbidity as well. And then we're all familiar with the Spartina, the sand cordgrass. It's evergreen, great for erosion control. You find this in nature. It's great for bank stabilization. So, add this to areas where you need it, and it's just a very functional plant. All right, so now we'll talk about some less known native plants that do well in the completely offshore, completely submerged areas. It's where the water is the deepest, away from the slope, always inundated. Okay, so you've got to love anything that's a fragrant water lily, Nymphea odorata, one of my favorite water plants. What more to say? It's evergreen, it's pretty, it's native. And then we have some sedges and bulrush. So, they might not strike you as the most attractive because they don't have a fancy flower, but once again, keep in mind their functionality. So the sedge here is evergreen, and it does have a unique seed cluster up there at the top. And then the giant bulrush, this one can get pretty big. It's evergreen, great for erosion control, taking up nutrients. It forms that barrier to help with wave energy. So very useful plants. And keep in mind the waterfowl, birds, all of these are excellent habitat for wildlife. The smooth cordgrass, this is the other type of Spartina. Now this one is better for salt areas. I believe the other one we mentioned is not as salt tolerant. So this is the one if you need it to be salt tolerant to select this one. Flood tolerant, so very functional. And then we have this eelgrass, which I've never seen in real life, but I'm kind of fascinated by it. So it's a key species in aquatic ecosystems, and so used in restoration projects, very good with sediment stability, helping with water clarity, food and habitat for aquatic organisms. And something I find interesting about it, it spends its entire life cycle underwater, except during pollination, when the female flower reaches the water's surface. And it can get up to 6 foot long and or 6 foot tall and just 1 inch wide. So that was just kind of an overview of some of my favorite pondscaping, that's the word, pondscaping plants, and why they're useful, different characteristics of them. Like I said, there's that EDIS publication that lists, I think it's 82 species. So if you have a project, it's an excellent resource. You can, I love this picture here because, it can be used to enhance the landscape in so many lovely ways. Functionality, water quality, providing for wildlife, as well as neighborhood beautification. So this lovely fire pit here just kind of adds to the whole area and provides a place for the residents to sit and just enjoy it. So I am going to open this up for questions, but also just before I forget, if you wouldn't mind, I have a very short poll. There's just 4 questions. If you wouldn't mind, please just responding. That way I do get some feedback and evaluation data to use. Are there any questions? I'm gonna open my chat here.
There's no questions in the chat, but feel free to either write the question or unmute yourself and ask the question.
I know there's kind of a lot of information here, but if you have any follow-up questions, I also, what I'll send you, Ava, if you wanted to send to them, I actually created a fact sheet that when I present this in person, I just remembered, I provide that instead of the PowerPoint because it kind of has all this information in a easier to follow format.
Then send us that instead of the PowerPoint if you feel if you feel it's more useful, that's fine.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you inviting me to present again, and I wish you so much luck on your plant sale this weekend and the rest of the week having this program.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Thank you for being part of this. And again, thank you for all the participants. I hope I see you on Saturday. And if not, then you can visit Tara in April or Katie in Seminole on Saturday too. Or actually there is another big plant sale, and that one is way bigger, but you need to come to ours first. And then in a few weeks, there is the Lou Garden plant sale too. It's coming up. So Nora, yes. And also if you need any more information when you are addressing your HOA, depending on the county that you are, most of the agents will be happy to support you in any way, either going and present to the HOA or giving you more supporting information. What we don't do, we don't get in between lawyers and associations, but our job is to educate. So that's one of the things that we do.
That's right. And Nori, I saw your comment and I am happy to help you however I can. She's one of our St. Johns County Master Gardeners. So you just let me know what you need. We can do that together.
Thank you very much. Go enjoy your lunch and enjoy the weather. It's been very, very nice. Although I think today is a little humid and hot, but it's still very nice.
I know.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Tara. And I hope I see you at 3 o'clock or tomorrow or Saturday. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.